Welcome to our Hangout series, Innovation by Design. This is designed for innovation and design thinking leaders to share what is working for them, as well as the tips to help others be more successful. Today, our Hangout, Physical and Digital, a Design Fusion, will be a lively dialogue, as you will soon see. Let me go ahead and set up what's going to happen over the next hour, and then we'll jump in to hear from the panelists, just what you're here for. So first, what we'll have is about a 45-minute dialogue among our panelists, talking about our topic, and then we'll be taking your questions. So please be sure to fill out any of your questions or vote on the questions you see in the questions and answers tab. We will take those in the last 10 to 15 minutes. And there's also polls. It helps us if you fill out the polls so we can really understand best how to tailor the answers to the questions so they really address and are relevant to you. We also have folks standing by on Twitter. We're at altitude_inc, hashtag innovation by design, hashtag design thinking. And we frankly would love to have you engage in the conversation with us. And for the question that comes out the most, yes, you will get a copy of the record of this session. An email will go out on Monday with a link to the record. So now let's go ahead and get in. I did see on the chat session, folks asking a little bit on really, what is this all about? So just as a reminder for folks, consumers are fusing digital and physical worlds more and more. In fact, there's 77% of Americans are on smartphones and 72% are on social media. Companies need to fuse the physical and digital worlds to survive today, as you'll hear from our panelists. To consumers, the real and virtual worlds are becoming one, especially for the millennial generation, which everyone is trying to still figure out. Branding, strategy, communication, and products, for example, need to include the same experience online and in the real world. The way consumers perceive your products in your organization, it's really become as much dependent on the real life interactions as on the digital experiences. So we'll be talking about this today on our panel. And now let me introduce the panelists so they can share their experiences and their examples with fusing the digital and physical. First, we have Dave Braverman. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
And he is Senior Digital Product Manager at Stanley Black & Decker. Dave is focused on helping the 174-year-old S&P 500 company extend its leadership in mechanical electrical products to those products that take full advantage of the emerging Internet of Things, or as we all call IoT. In his current role, Dave defines success as connecting previously unconnected products and developing exceptional digital solutions that drive productivity and efficiency across a wide variety of industries for customers around the globe. So Dave, I know you'll have a lot to share today, so thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And Gary and I, this is like old hat for Gary and I, right? We've done this before. Gary Hasty, thank you for joining. So Gary is the Director of Strategy and Innovation at AT&T, where he is focused on the hospitality industry. He describes himself, I love this, Gary, as a professional geek or a troublemaker who years ago accidentally fell into management to translate geek speak into business speak. Should I just add, Gary, and you planned this out very well?
The troublemaking? Yes.
Yeah. And he's been involved in roles from gaming, industrial engineering, process improvement in AT&T Labs, to currently working with AT&T Foundries to work on future concepts across enterprise clients in hospitality. Thanks for joining, Gary. And Caitlin Geisler is Director of Product Strategy at Optum. Hi, Caitlin. And Optum is a division of the United Health Group. It's a Fortune 6 company. And Caitlin is a founder of Fusion, which is an internal innovation and consulting team at United Health that leverages design thinking methodologies to drive business experience and development strategies. And I am Gretchen Hoffman, Vice President of Marketing at Altitude, which is a design and innovation consulting firm. We were acquired this year by Accenture, and we're focused on product innovation and design. Altitude's based in Boston with clients including Under Armour, Nike, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and Colgate, and some more. And now for what you're really here for, let's get into our panel discussion. So to get started, again, as I mentioned before, because some folks wanted to really understand what we're all talking about, what would be helpful is if each panelist, and Caitlin, why don't we start with you, could really go around and give an example, really, as the Hangout title suggests, really about innovation where physical and digital meet for a design fusion. Caitlin.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Gretchen. And I think most of us can perhaps relate to this, but if we think about the way that we all have our phones in our pockets, in our hands, trying to juggle too many things at once because we want to keep our phone in our hands. And what we find is that, particularly in our industry, we have nurses out in the field that are trying to do just that. And so they are in the physical environment. They are visiting people in their homes and helping them maintain wellness. And we ask them to capture all that they're doing while they're out in the field. And they have their kit, and they have their cup of coffee, and they have a bag of umbrellas that they need to give out to all these members and patients that they're visiting. And with all that, they also have to they have a tablet with them. So it's that combination of physical and digital where we seek to make sure that that digital really supports their physical environment, knowing that that physical environment can change from one house to another, from one patient to another. And we need to make sure that we're providing them with an experience that's flexible, that flexes with their ever-changing physical environment.
Excellent. Dave, do you want to jump in and possibly give us an example?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. One of the examples will come from our consumer products. So we were looking at something that is maybe not considered an invention, but definitely an innovation, which is vacuums, like robotic vacuums. And one of the things that we wanted to do was try and make vacuuming fun. So how do we do that? How do we increase the enjoyment of something that is perennially a joke to many people about cleaning their house and things? And using that technology and embedding some technology into robotic vacs, which in itself is a digital and physical product. We also were looking at other things that are in the house that people use every day. As Caitlin mentioned, it's the phone. People usually have their phone around. So we looked and worked on ways of trying to incorporate some emotion and enjoyment and bringing really, honestly, the whole family into vacuuming and utilizing a little bit of some gamification to some extent. We got we did some test marketing, and we actually have some features that are only accessible from utilizing the digital that now allow you to control and utilize the physical. Like manually driving the vacuum is something that I have a 6-year-old son absolutely loves. I can just give him my phone and tell him to go to town, and he'll spend a half an hour vacuuming because he loves driving this thing around. It's a personification. So that's one of those areas of blending and trying to do, it's not an invention, but it's an innovation in that we're trying to turn vacuuming from a chore into something that is more enjoyable, and it actually puts a smile on your face versus something that you dread to do every day or every once in a while.
I love that. My kids like the vacuum too.
Do you physically have to make the onion sound, or is it make it itself?
We looked at adding that. I will tell you, the personification of these things are quite amazing. The first thing some of our developers did was put googly eyes on top of all of our robotic vacuums to make them look like little people. Yeah. It's fantastic.
That's great. Yeah.
That's great.
Gary.
Yeah, I mean, ours is, people forget that we're a really, really large brick and mortar retailer also. So we've got, 4,500 stores. And we're looking at more and more of how we're going to start integrating and bringing digital into that physical world. So a lot of the things that we're doing now is self-service and being able to almost make it to where you don't have to go to a store to get a new phone or something like that. You could pick it out online, do everything you want online, get it ready to activate, and then see the stores as a distribution channel and just go in and get whatever you've picked up. And so it's taking some of the elements in the physical world and moving it to digital, but then giving it as an option to customers. So we're not going to totally replace physical with digital or vice versa. It's having these options to go down for either way.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our most popular, I'll call it IoT case studies is STEM, which is actually a concept project that Altitude did. And we have the press ask for it. It's on our website, by the way, if anyone wants to see it, altitudeinc.com. But it's been very popular, and it really talks about how we remix the home cocktail experience. And it really mixes the physical and digital, the way that you're able to really have human-centered innovation, be able to be at the focus. As we went and talked to a lot of people to really understand, how do they, entertain, that type of thing. And it was really empathizing with the people, thinking beyond the bottle, right? And it shows a lot about how you can upend the traditional practices. And what I find with IoT, at least a lot, is it helps you think of a whole new way of doing things that you never would have thought of before, which is exciting, like having your kids vacuum, which is wonderful. But anyway, so Caitlin, I'm interested, since the user experience is key to success, can you share how you're capturing the user experience? And how has this changed the past 10 years or so, and why?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things that I would say that we're seeing now is that design thinking and human-centered design specifically are becoming almost household names within the office, and we find that a lot more people are broadly aware and understanding of what it means to bring personas in. Let's understand it from a user perspective. Let's shift our mindset to not being just about how can we tweak the product, how can we get the product better, but what do our users really want? And so with that broader acceptance, particularly within our company and the teams that we're interacting with, we're really starting to get a lot more buy-in for the tactics that we want to use when we're working with teams internally. And so first and foremost, one of the biggest things we like to do is get out in the field and make sure that can we meet with doctors in their offices face to face? Can we speak with members about their experience? Can we follow? We've done ride-alongs with. I mentioned that the house calls team, the nurses team. We've done ride-alongs, and it's really just seeing it and getting right at street level is the most critical thing. And so, thinking about the past 10 years, that's really the big shift that we've seen is the acceptance of those types of tactics to really understand the user. And then for us, we look to bring those individuals in as best we can, knowing that we can't actually physically bring them in and have them stay with us for the duration of a project. But we create personas out of those individuals, and we name them and we use them by name and make sure that they feel like a real body within the room. And we have some projects that have been going, it's maybe been about 2-3 years since we've worked together, and we're still calling them by name. And I'll ask, how's Dr. Smith, and how's George, and so we talk about those individuals, those personas as if they're real and as if they still exist, and we hope that we're still serving them well.
Yeah, excellent points. It's interesting because we have very, very different perspectives, since you're each from very different industries, right? Which is, I think, great viewpoints to have. What I'd love to just hear about from each of you is, how do you think your industry is more tailored? Like, is there anything that's very specific that you need to consider that possibly other industries may not? And Gary, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things when you're going from physical to digital things. What is your best friend's phone number? When's the last time you looked up a phone number in a phone book? Things like that don't happen. That's why we were out of the phone book business. So yeah, I mean, it's taking a lot of the things from a 100-plus-year-old company that we've always been accustomed to with the operators and things like that. Now we're totally changing into a software company. We're not a phone company. And I always tell people that, the last T in AT&T was for the telegraph, and we stopped innovating on that a couple of years ago. So it's taking, we're not a telephone company anymore either. So we're more of a media software company. It's the entire evolution of our business.
Yeah.
Can I still get my telegraph service with you, though?
Probably still good enough.
All right. Dave, what are your thoughts?
So it's interesting, much as Gary mentioned, that people don't think about AT&T with brick and mortar stores. Similarly, people don't realize that Stanley Black & Decker, how many industries we're across, and this combination of physical digital is there's some similarities and some pretty significant differences based on the industry. We are in security. For example, we monitor Starbucks from a security. We have call centers for, like you would think of back in the day with Brinks or ADT. We invented the automatic door, so we have like access systems. We have over 100 different little fasteners in the iPhone. So we make very small, precise fasteners as well as automotive fasteners. And then, of course, things like tools, right, which is what most people think of when they think of Stanley Black & Decker. So there's different nuances. Like when we look at the tools business, we see the digital and physical in that you have physical tools. And, we have some of the issues of how do we change from just a single purchase to a recurring revenue, right? How do we sustain that? How do we, you always will have a new startup, a new Kickstarter, a new Indiegogo saying, I can build a better, whatever it might be, tape measure. I can build a better, believe it or not, screwdriver, right? 3D printing is impacting that. So people want to make models, and why buy when you could just do that? But then when you look at some of our industries, like our access and security, how digital and physical match there in some ways is almost the reverse. We do offer a service. How do we leverage some of these technologies? Let's call it drones or facial recognition, like computer vision with a mechanical door, right? So how do you get it to where a door will only open when it knows who the person is through computer vision? So some of the, the differences in the way it's impacting are from the business model, from new competitors, and then from really just a reimagining or redefinition of what that segment may be and the products and services that are within those different business units.
Yeah, I did not know Stanley Black & Decker did all those things. That's kind of amazing.
I know.
Yeah, we're in oil and gas too, which is the one that blows everybody away.
It's amazing. And so you can really see why you're an IoT, It's like,
yeah.
Caitlin.
Yeah, I think that, with healthcare in its many forms and delivery systems, you think about there are some things that are always going to have to be performed, at least for now. We'll let the future tell us otherwise, but they're always going to have to be in the physical space. But we have the emergence of telehealth and how much that's able to support particular populations, whether it's if you're too far from you're in a very rural area and you're too far from a great hospital or a great specialist, you're able to connect in that capacity. Or if you're just wanting to not have to go to the doctor, we have all sorts of options now that you can connect. I know I was just experiencing this myself over the holidays. I got a little sick and I thought, well, it's not a good time to go and sit and wait in a doctor's office. And so I pulled up my UHC app and got in there and in 15 minutes saw a doctor and got taken care of, and it was cheap and very convenient for me. And I think that's how can we make sure that on this mission for wellness and really supporting our member population and beyond is how do we start to support people in terms of the conveniences in their lives, knowing that at this point, particularly in healthcare, is that consumers really are the ones with a lot of the power to make decisions around how they maintain their own wellness. And so for us, when we can be putting out telehealth solutions and connections and clinics, urgent care clinics that really sort of start to augment the buffet, if you will, of places you can go when you're not feeling well or when you are and you just need that quick tune-up. So I think that's really, it's become an interesting balance of saying choice, and digital has really made a play there in creating choice for members and patients.
Yeah, great examples. I mean, they really are. And you can see really from the different perspectives from the different industries. And so Dave, I have to jump back to you. because since Stanley Black & Decker does so much, you clearly have a lot of opportunities. Talk about advantages and challenges that you're facing, and just love to hear a little more. And remember, for the audience, from a perspective where they could learn from those.
Sure. The advantages, we are a house of brands. So where one of our major competitors brands everything under their brand name, and everything comes under it's that product's very specifically for that brand. We have hundreds of different brands. So just even within our tools industry, Black & Decker, DeWalt, Porter Cable. We've recently acquired Craftsman. You go international, and we have Facom and Proto and Mac Tools here in the States for automotive. So one of the challenges, or I should say advantages, is being able to look at a consumer or customer and what their ultimate job is that they're trying to get done, and say, how do they leverage different products from across those brands? Because many times, just the most basic one that I use internally all the time to continue to advocate for this is anybody doing any type of home project will generally have a drill of some sort, whether it's Black & Decker or DeWalt, depending on who they are, but Stanley tape measure. And we make both of those. And those two are separate brands. So how do you have an experience where you're going to be using both of those? Because my job isn't the task of measuring. So it's taking that step back, and it's looking at the larger job. Sorry, I do use my hands when I talk. So it's looking at that larger job to be done, and saying, okay, how do we leverage our brands and the different products and bring it together? I will also say that's one of our challenges. The brands are very independent. They each have a very unique brand personality. They each have a certain customer type that they target to. And they've historically, in 100 and some odd years, never had to really cross. When you're talking about a drill, I don't need to think about what brand of tape measure you're using. But now I do. When your digital has changed the perspective some. One of the challenges I will say, and I think this is probably a common challenge for a lot of folks, is we are still in the era where technology is driving the product, where people see a technology, augmented reality, drone technology, even something just mobile apps, right? Even starting there and saying, how do we do that with our products? And that's not the way that you really want to approach it. The more that you want to take a step back and say, what is it that they're trying to do? Because the best answer may not be that technology. That the answer could be, yes, that technology solves that problem, but that problem doesn't need to be solved with that technology.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent. So let's go just a little bit further down this path, and maybe Gary, you could jump in and just talk a little more. You've given some examples, but talk really, how are you leveraging the new digital and physical capabilities?
Probably, the biggest transition we've got right now as a company, we've got a very old, reliable network that is all built around physical, concepts, physical switches, and everything is copper and fiber all over the place and all physical. We've got an initiative internally for the year 2020 to have 70% of our network be software defined. So we're starting to take a lot of the physical elements out and making it all software definable. The idea is, instead of having a truck roll come, if you need don't wait a couple of months to get a truck roll out to you for a technician to do it. Putting a lot of what we had to do behind the scenes in the black box that is our network, and putting that in the hands of the consumer. And so we're letting them do a lot of the stuff based on us moving more and more to software. So, you need more bandwidth, click here. You need, to put a new firewall in a location, click here. With our DirecTV purchase, hey, you want to watch HBO for Game of Thrones premiere, click here. And you could be Mother of the Dragons. So it's taking a lot of what we had to have trained, technical folks moving boxes around and plugging things in and putting that in their hands on their mobile device or on a PC.
Yeah. Excellent points. Dave, just interested on the leveraging, but really from the standpoint of, can you give examples of how you're actually using the information, like from the digital inputs that you might have missed otherwise, and then share the same of what you might have missed for the physical interactions?
Sure, absolutely. Let's look at an example of our 20-volt connected battery. We have one for DeWalt and one for Black & Decker, but let's talk about the DeWalt 20-volt. What does digital provide us? Patterns of usage. We start to understand our customer at a level that you've never been able to understand your customer before. We think we know who is buying our product, but to be able to understand whether they are a weekend warrior who purchased a DeWalt drill and how they're using the battery to power the drill, we can start to see when they use it, what the state of charge was when they begun, what's the state of charge when they finished. We can start to see, even through some of the information, if they give us access to capture location, whether they're using it in the same location. And so we can start to segment and better understand the people that are truly buying and using our products and how they're using them. And then you can take that same and reverse for the physical. Let's look at the battery and say, we know one of the major impacts to battery life are charge cycles. So how often is a battery put in and out of a charger? And at what charge level was it put in? And how long is it staying in that charger before being used? And so having that information from the battery being stored and unstored and getting that incremented each time and understanding that allows us to improve our product even at a manufacturing level. So not only can we improve it for the customer, we can improve it for the manufacturing level, and we can improve our marketing and even the product suite and how we would want to evolve and tailor that product, either our digital elements or the physical product, based upon the usage and patterns and understanding our consumers at a level that we haven't been able to. And honestly, many times in a way that's not a privacy concern, right? That it's this type of information that they're not overly worried about us knowing because it clearly benefits them.
Yeah, great example. I was at Autodesk, their new build workspace in Boston recently, and they have like 60 pieces of machinery. I'm sure there's a correct name for their machines, but I'm going to call them machines. And yet they still haven't built out the top floor. And they're using all the data, right, from, who's using the machines, how often they're being used. It's a lot what you're saying, Dave, to really decide how are we going to build out the top floor, right? Like how should it be designed? What machines should we put up there? Maybe it doesn't need all machines. Maybe they'll find that people are just hanging out and need workroom space, but they're waiting to see what's happening in their new build space before they actually build out the top floor. And this is another example of using the digital data to influence really what's built for the physical world, right? So anyway, I just thought I'd add that because I thought it was cool.
Yeah, very cool.
But anyway, so rolling through with our panelists, exciting topic. Let's jump to Gary. How are you building this new capability within your organization? I mean, you've given us examples, but also how do people go about actually making it start to happen in-house or partnerships, acquisitions? What are you doing?
The answer to that's yes. We're working on all of the above. So I mean, we've got a workforce of 280,000 folks. We're doing a massive retraining internally and teaching at least the basic concepts of software development across the board, because we know in the future it's going to be hard to hire that many people. And so let's train some people that understand the world now and train them in what the world's going to be. I just got back from IoT World in San Francisco earlier this week, and today I'm in the AT&T IoT Foundry in Plano, Texas. This is where we've got our IoT experts here, but we also bring in outside companies. We're actually working with a customer now where they've got some business problems because we don't want to come up with solutions and say, here, please use this. We want to hear about the business problem and see if we can solve it. So they're in today just talking about some of their business problems, and we're going to ideate and come up with ways that we could approach that. And that may involve bringing a partner in. So we're going down every avenue we can possibly do.
Yeah, this is really an exciting time. I mean, it really is, in terms of all the opportunities, and also really making sure that we know that the consumer's at the hub these days, right? In demand. So.
Well, I mean, the funniest line I heard at IoT World was, everyone is looking for how we're going to monetize IoT. The only people that have actually monetized are conference folks and consultants. So it's like, now everybody else is like, okay, how can we really monetize IoT?
That's a great line. So Caitlin, let's get you back in the conversation here. We've talked a little bit about, how important it is to really be user-centric, right? So maybe we can talk a little in terms of process, really. How do you go about using in-person interviews in your process? Can you talk a little on the examples of how you're making sure you really know what the consumer wants?
Yeah, a great example, it was a project I was working on about a year ago, and it was in support of physicians. So United Health Group is a very large organization, and I'm actually aligned under Optum, and Optum has a division, Optum Care, which has employed physicians, and we have clinic locations. And so with that, we were looking to help them optimize a couple of areas. And so we got a group of diverse people together. We had designers, we had architects, we had some IoT experts in the room, and we were looking at this and saying, okay, we really want to, to get to your point, we really want to know where the problem is before we get ahead of ourselves with what technology could be the solution. And so we brought clinicians into the room. And so when you have this great, we had bunch of problem solvers and people who just live for solving problems and coming up with solutions and thinking about the latest and greatest. But we brought the clinicians into the room with us, and they were being pulled away from their day job. They're in scrubs, and we just did a very, very similar to what we're doing right now, where I just talked it through and said, okay, let's tell me about your day. How do you begin? And we armed everybody with, the old faithful Sharpie and pad of Post-its, and said, what we need everybody to do is listen for the opportunities. And opportunities are born out of pains and challenges and things that we might not be seeing or hearing based off of.
Can you hear Caitlin?
No, she froze up on.
Okay, so until we have her back, let me just add to folks in terms of, frankly, what we are talking about is how do you really make sure, right, that you get to know who your consumer is and go in their environment. Like we have the military as a client, and we actually go out onto the Army bases and talk with them and get entrenched with them. We even have people here that shave their heads so they can fit in better. That's really true.
Wow.
So that they are more approachable, so that people will talk to them. Right. And they even have to have their bosses, should I say sergeants, I don't know what level, pardon me, but be able to that they can actually go and be able to talk with us, right? So it's really important. And I'll also just comment to folks, if you want to look at our blog, Altitude Inc., our website, it's under Insights. There's a recent one on ethnographic research by our strategy person. And again, I'm not trying to sell Altitude, but it's more just, I think it's a helpful one to look at because it really shows how powerful ethnographic research can be. And you're really, really getting the human-centered immersion technique, right? Involved in your research and observing people in their natural settings, right? And I think that's really important. Like I mentioned, the military bases. And it's leveraged at the front end of the engagement, so you can discover the unmet or unknown needs, right? I think that's very, very critical, so that you're not walking in with assumptions, right? You got to be open-minded and really observe.
And that's one of the things that my team and peers do is we have immersion events also. We want to go out and see the business problem. without a solution in our head. And so we go out, I've sewed shoes in a retail store. I've put an orange apron on before and been, selling lumber. And, but we want to be in their shoes rather than saying, hey, here's a perfect product that's going to fix your problem. What's your problem again? So we want to see what the problem is and then go, oh, okay, this is how this could work. And it's a tool for us to go back to our product teams and help them retool and say, look, you're missing the boat here. Make some of these changes, and that will actually help this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is just so key that you get out of your office and you stay open-minded, right? And observe. So it's great. So Caitlin, thank you. Welcome back. So I think we got the most of what you were saying. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add or.
I think it's really ultimately comes down to, what the conversation sounds like it carried on with. Get out there and get in front of people because your users' voices are undisputed. You can't tell them that they're wrong. They're right. The experience is whatever they are experiencing. It's not your process that you hoped. And you have to know how your product is being used in the wild. And because however users are using it is their right way. And you can't say that they're using it wrong.
But it looked great in the spreadsheet.
I sure did, right? Those requirements, beautiful.
Right.
So if it's okay, I'd love to ask a question of both. So let's say that after you've gone out and you've gotten this initial idea of what could potentially, you've gone out, you spent the time and you come up with something that is a blend of both digital and physical worlds. And it might require some kind of change on both parts, both the digital and or physical, to create something new. The iterative testing of that, I will say we don't have every answer, right, at Stanley Black & Decker. We're working through this like many, many companies. And that is one of our challenges, is being able to quickly iterate a physical component and a digital element to be able to test without spending too much time, money, and energy in just early testing. When it's only one or really physical, I believe, is probably more challenging, but digital historically has been a little easier for early and rapid. But the combination of the two, it seems that digital needs to inherits the challenges of the physical world, where I'm curious to see how you guys might have done that, how you might be attacking that. Because you get these concepts, but
we physically are attacking that with our foundries. So I used to be in AT&T labs. I used to tell people I had 40 PhDs working for me. My job was to teach PhDs, but they're a patent machine. They were doing the invention. We still issue 2 patents a day. So we're constantly inventing. That's not innovation. So we physically built these foundries where I tell people those are the college dropouts who do really cool stuff really quick. And the idea for the foundries was to reach out, and here in Plano where I'm at today, we purposely put our big data and our IoT foundry together because those two worlds have to be together, sort of. Yeah. And the idea here is we do 12-week sprints where we talk about a problem. We're in with a customer today talking about a problem. We're probably going to work on this for up to 12 weeks. And at the end of 12 weeks, it's thumbs up or thumbs down. And we're going to move on. If it's thumbs up, all right, then we're going to go to the next 12 weeks. So that's how we're doing it. We're truly doing this iterative thing of, and here we're lucky enough to have everything you could want to build physical or digital. So, the coolest thing here is the water cutting machine. It can cut through 11 inches of steel. Everybody oohs and ahs over that. We don't know why we have it, but we have it in case we have to.
You never know. Never know when you're going to need that one. Yeah.
So that's, granted, we're a large company. So we've got the resources to be able to make almost a startup that's really well funded within our company. And then we bring in other folks to offset, some of the skills or the knowledge that we need and come up with something. But the key is, I'm okay if at the end of 12 weeks, I give something a thumbs down and we stop it. So that's that's how we've had to sort of change our entire culture of, used to, this is the phone company. You fail, you're fired. Well, no, we got to say no. We truly did. We failed, but we learned something in 12 weeks, and I didn't fund something for 5 years to find out that we failed.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah, I think on that topic, we do a dynamic storyboarding where we'll do things like, I'm going to use my hands for a second here, but we'll say, I've got the device in my hand. What am I doing? And we've done some of these simulation walkthroughs of let's put the digital in the physical. And there was a project I was working on where we realized we actually could completely eliminate a big piece of what we thought was critical to the whole ecosystem. And we said, we don't even need it because we've built in so many other technology components around it, right, that the one thing we thought we needed doesn't even need to be a player in the ecosystem anymore. And then we came to the realization that, okay, if you're going to have these two devices near each other, well, we're going to need to make sure that they don't cross signals. And so you start to put it, just visualize it, or even, with Post-its or tape on the wall, say, here's where this would be and here's where this would be, and kind of go through those. We do a lot of that, where we try to kind of physically get in the space a little bit before we go too far.
I'm going to jump in for the folks that are listening in. We will be taking your questions in about 10 minutes. So please be sure to go to the question and answer tab, vote on the questions you want to make sure we get to, or submit your own questions. So again, please know that we will get to those in about 10 minutes or less. We do want to make sure to hear from you also. Okay. And with that, Dave, you've talked a fair amount about what you're doing. We've talked more and more about how we really need to know and be in the environment of our users. Are there any other approaches that you're using that we haven't already talked about?
There's some of the, I guess, no, we've touched on most of them. I will say we have one of our divisions, in all honesty, is looking, and I'm helping with this, of how to use augmented reality or virtual reality to do product testing for I didn't actually mention every one of our groups. We're in infrastructure too. So road construction, other city type infrastructure projects. Their products are massive, like concrete, jackhammery type things. And so they
like I-85.
Yeah, exactly. Like our I-85. So that's one of the things that, we're looking into. We haven't used it yet, but it is something that we're looking at, using some of this technology to be able to perform better physical digital combination testing. So our product would never be, in this case, an augmented reality type of product, but does an augmented reality or virtual reality, or call it mixed reality or merged, whichever term you'd like to use right now, does that provide us an opportunity for a different type of learning, of getting out there and getting in front of our customers, by bringing them in and putting them back in their environment, albeit virtually. Now there's some, challenges, and that's what we're looking through, right? Haptic gloves, things like that. So I think it's really early in that, but that is something that at least we're kicking around.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about virtual reality. I'd be interested, maybe Gary jump in here, with the growth of AI, machine learning, natural language interactions. Have they impacted or influenced your approach in your industry?
Yeah, definitely AI, machine learning and natural language especially is the hot one now, especially in hospitality. People are slowly getting accustomed to having their speakers at home and talking to Alexa or Google. And so they're starting more and more to want to be able to do that along the entire guest journey. So we work a lot with, so we've got the connected home, a digital life product. We have the connected car. We're in about 20 of the manufacturers, for a connected car. Voice and natural language are key to that interaction. And so how can we extend that further and further? The biggest thing on the natural learning and AI, I was one of those back in the 80s. I was enthralled with a Tandy prologue book about AI that was going to be the greatest thing in the world. Didn't quite pan out. But with IoT, it's starting. I mean, it's more and more needed, because when you've got Internet of Things, that thing is not important. It's when you get multiple things together and they start talking to each other, then then it gets too big. And that's why we have the IoT and the Big Data Foundry here together. That we've got to start mashing up all of those sensor information that we're getting and make sense out of it. And that's where we're hiring data scientists like crazy. And we're having to use, some true machine learning to make it a benefit, to the users.
Anybody else have any thoughts here?
One thing that I would mention that I think is really critical to this whole thing is the connectivity element. And what happens, considering connectivity, as we've even experienced here on this Hangout, right, can be intermittent.
Right.
And so when you're talking natural voice, machine learning, AI, and a lot of that is coming from the cloud, how do edge devices play into this? Especially if you're talking about any type of life safety issue, where if the connectivity isn't there, but you're relying on, Alexa, call the police. If your internet is down, that's going to be a big challenge.
Exactly.
So how do you have that fail-safe is a big consideration for us, and I think for everyone.
And I'll tell you, the biggest buzzwords at IoT World this week was fog, mist, cloud. So you've got to have your cloud play, but then the fog is the on-prem edge computing, and then the mist was the embedded computing for that sensor, for that device.
Yeah.
So it's everything in technology is cyclical. So we're all going to the cloud, but guess what? Now we got to bring some of that stuff back.
Right.
And especially when you start talking autonomous cars, milliseconds are important.
Yeah.
if I need to know when I need to brake. So I've got to have that at the edge or at the fog or the mist level. So those two things can talk to each other for the emergencies. And like in the healthcare industry, I really don't want best connectivity for my teledoctor. I really need him to be there. If I'm going through surgery or something like that, I don't want it just best case scenario.
Yeah, well, I think it's being, I read recently, and I don't know who to attribute the stat to, so forgive me, but that currently only 1% of things are smart. Right. And so that's the level of sort of progress in this space. And we feel like so many around us are emerging into being an IoT product and having that connectivity. But if we're only at 1%, that just it means that there's a lot of opportunity. But on top of that, it's to your point, it's being smart, no pun intended, about where do you go and what do you start to connect and what's most valuable to connect first. Maybe it's not something around a doctor doing remote surgery with an okay connection, but maybe it is taking something that is persistent and static and in the space that you are already functioning in and saying, how can I get that one thing to talk to me a little more than it does right now? Right. And what can that do to solve a problem and close even the simplest of gaps? Because I think what's true of all of our industries is the size and scale that we have. So we don't have to look at these massive, massive moments. You just need to look for something that is effective and then can impact at scale, which really starts to say it doesn't have to be large. It just has to be something important, and that could be a micro moment that you're connecting. Right. But at the scale of any of our industries, that's a massive, massive opportunity and value.
Yeah, and I think there's still some definitions around. A lot of people think IoT is just a connected device, and like you're saying, no, it's got to be smart. It's not that I can close the blinds in my house from my phone. That's just connectivity. I need the blinds, maybe to close after I'm 10 minutes out of my house to save on energy cost and things like that, where I don't have to fool with it. I need it smart, and that's where AI and machine learning is going to come to play.
Yeah, great points. So I'm going to jump in right now because I promised the audience we'd do 10 minutes of their questions, and we're at the 10 minutes. But I do want to give each of the panelists a chance to just go around, pick a couple, maybe 2 takeaways, briefly say what you want people to remember, like you've already said. So if I could just start, Dave, with you, and let's just
Sure.
go around and share a few things that you want to make sure people remember. Thank you.
The first thing is always challenge whether the technology is driving the product or whether the user need is at the core of what you're trying to do. That's one, is definitely think about that, because it's a lot of times, I think I mentioned earlier, that the technology can solve the problem, but should that problem be solved by that technology? And then the other is to look at, the other big takeaway is remember that anything that is physical and digital combined as a product, not necessarily as the experience, but as a physical and digital product, like a connected drill or something, that is one product, and that needs to be viewed as a one product, not as a physical product and as a digital component that are then mapped together. It is one single combined product. That's the way the consumers view it. And if one element doesn't work, then the product doesn't work in their mind. I think that's, those are like the 2 really big things for me. Single product and challenging yourself and everyone if the technology is driving or whether your user need is driving.
Excellent. Caitlin.
The one takeaway would be think of things as experiments. And this is what our team likes to do, where it might not be the whole, you don't have to think about things in large chunks, or if we were to implement or if we were to pilot, it's break it down into small experiments. What's the first thing you need to know? What's the first question that you need to have an answer to? And call it an experiment. Experiments are meant to be learned from. You have a hypothesis. You just need to know whether you're right or you're wrong, and then learn from that and move on to the next thing. But turning those assumptions into facts lets you incrementally move along in a progressive way. And so we like to call it just about everything we do an experiment, because we're going in with the intent of learning, not the intent of succeeding as to whether we were right. And so it's so much more important about learning and figuring out how you can keep tuning towards your hypothesis.
Gary.
One of the biggest things is don't insist that the digital world replace the physical world. You're seeing a lot more, especially in online retailers. You're seeing Amazon, you're seeing ThinkGeek. A lot of the digital players are saying, we need a physical element to this. So they're opening up physical stores. The other thing is when you're looking at taking processes from a physical process to a digital process, it's an opportunity to act like a 2-year-old and keep asking why. Because you're going to find all these processes that have been done in the physical that don't need to be translated to the digital world. And so it's an opportunity to change the process and make it better than just replicate it.
Great. I'm jumping through quickly here because I do want to get to the questions. So definitely we see that the consumers are at the hub. That means companies need to really make sure they understand their consumers, get out of their offices, make sure you're doing a lot of observation, so that you too can make it a delightful experience for the consumers for fusing digital and physical. So IoT is definitely the hot trend now, and we need to capitalize on it. So I really do want to thank our panelists very, very much. And what I'm going to do now is jump over to the questions, because I had promised that. So again, if you have any questions, go to the questions and answers tab. And I am doing the same right now. For the ones you want to make sure we get to, be sure you vote on those, okay? And I'm literally just going to read them. So we have one here that says, what do you see coming in the near future? Or what insights can you share about any projects and the potential of IoT adding digital attributes? And we talked a little bit about this, I think. AR, mixed reality, virtual reality to traditional unconnected physical products. Have we already answered that, or is there anything people want to add?
On VR, AR, I'm not a huge fan of VR yet. It's still a toy. Especially an example of, when we worked with Six Flags was taking a VR approach to one of their roller coasters. When you get out of sync with VR in the real world by a couple of milliseconds, you get nausea. So that it's not there. The technology is there. AR, I've got a lot of hope for. I think there's some room to grow in AR.
For another question, what do you wish you'd known about the innovation process when you started that you didn't, but you wish you knew?
Good question.
Is there anything about like the data that was coming out or anything?
You know what? You know what I might say to that one is that it's less of a process than you might think, even though there are a lot of books and mavens that here's the process you follow. I have found that loosely, yes, but it is a lot less of a process than I would have hoped.
there's no checkbox.
Yeah.
I would add to that right. It's not. There's no prescribed method that guarantees innovation. But as a belief I've adopted recently is that an innovation is only an innovation when it hits the market, and so you've got otherwise you're not doing something for your user base if they're not using it. So with that, it's get it out there. And if it's not something that's supposed to go out there, ditch it and move on to the next thing. And don't necessarily be married to the first idea. Make sure you're excited about the paces that it'll go through in the evolution. So.
Yeah, I mean, like what we have here, we still have folks that come to an ideation session at our foundries. They walk into our room with no agenda and a room's full of Legos. They're like, well, we have the CIO here. We need an agenda. And it's like, no, the best innovation is let's let it flow.
Yeah. So we've talked about some examples already, but there is one question that says, can you give examples of products that have evolved from physical to digital successfully or not? I mean, I always think of Nest, right? I mean, is I think a really good example. I don't know if you have a couple others that anyone can just rattle off to help folks here.
I mean, the one of the I think cornerstone products is photography and cameras. Right, cameras have completely changed, the entire landscape, and then even moving into smartphones and becoming this ubiquitous. But I feel like that is a really good example of something that over time has just continually evolved to where it's a niche market to use film today.
Mm-hmm. So one more, as an engineer designer who's interested in this fusion of digital and physical, I want to better understand what similar opportunities for young designers in the industry. Do you guys have any programs for people first trying to get into this, or any suggestions on what possibly they would, promote, let's say in resumes or anything like that? It's always nice to help young people.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've got a huge, college hiring program, interns, co-ops constantly. We're looking, a lot of unique thinkers, especially data scientists, and looking at the data. We've got mechanical engineers. We've actually got a group that has some anthropologists in it looking at the human interaction with systems. So yeah, we've got a pretty vast college hire program that we use.
Great. So one more question. I'm going to jump on and then we'll go to the closing. How are you dealing with the issue of trust, which is a good question in IoT? As we automate more, we lose physical connection and gain fear of the unknown. What types of human factors, tools, and studies have worked, and really what's failed?
I would say that it's almost as if you have to have the trust before you might implement a certain level of trust before you're going to try to swap something out around a particular physical to digital experience. And it is a hard blend when you want to make sure that that it's feeling personalized and specific to your member, to your user, and that it's also not tipping over into a big brother sort of capacity where so much, and I think it's something that gets honed over time. And you can look at Google Glass and that first launch, and that was a little rough. And they've since tweaked it and found its home. And I think that's the thing, is that it's a product market fit element of. It's just because your market was wrong doesn't mean your product was wrong. And so you just need to find the market that is willing to accept a couple of, different variances.
Yeah, excellent. So we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank our panelists from United Health Group, AT&T, and Stanley Black & Decker for a very, very lively dialogue, very informative. Also invite the folks to go to our website, altitudeinc.com. There's more free and valuable resources, and you could register for our next hangout in June, how to create a culture of innovation. Gary will be on again, sharing his insights, and also US Bank and American Greeting. I absolutely thank everybody. Thank our panelists. Thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us, and make it a great one. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.